What happens when one of Hollywood's most iconic voices walks onto a daytime talk show and refuses to play by the rules? Sam Elliott, the man known for his legendary mustache and no-nonsense attitude, sat down on The View for what was supposed to be a friendly chat about his latest project. But within minutes, the conversation took a sharp turn that nobody saw coming. What started as typical morning television quickly escalated into one of the most intense exchanges ever broadcast on daytime TV. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And by the end, security was involved. This is the story of how a simple interview turned into absolute chaos. Before we get into the details, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about all of this. Now, let's dive into how this whole situation unfolded. Sam Elliott walked onto the set with that signature stride of his, the kind that makes you think of dusty western towns and showdowns at high noon. The audience erupted in applause as he made his way to the table, waving politely but keeping that stoic expression he's known for. He settled into his seat, adjusting his jacket as the cameras focused in on him. Whoopi Goldberg started with the introductions, welcoming him to the show and mentioning his decades-long career in Hollywood. Sam nodded, thanking her with that deep, gravelly voice that's narrated countless commercials and brought characters to life on the big screen. Joy Behar jumped in almost immediately, not wasting any time with pleasantries. She leaned forward, looking directly at Sam with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I want to ask you about some recent comments you made in an interview where you discussed the changing landscape of Hollywood and how certain values seem to be shifting, she said. Sam took a breath, clearly measuring his words carefully. He said he believed in authenticity, in telling stories that meant something, and that sometimes the industry lost sight of that in favor of what was trendy or politically convenient. Joy's expression shifted slightly, her smile tightening. She asked him to clarify what he meant by politically convenient. Her tone suggested she already knew where this was going. Sam didn't back down. He explained that he'd been in this business long enough to see trends come and go, and that sometimes the focus on checking boxes overshadowed the focus on telling good stories. He said he believed in treating everyone with respect, but that didn't mean he had to agree with every direction the industry was taking. The other hosts exchanged glances, and you could feel the temperature in the studio rising. Sonny Hostin chimed in, asking Sam if he thought diversity in storytelling was a problem. Sam shook his head slowly, his voice steady as he responded. He said diversity wasn't the issue at all, that he'd worked with talented people from all walks of life throughout his career. The issue, he said, was when the story became secondary to the message. When writers and directors were more concerned with making a statement than making something that resonated with audiences on a human level. Joy wasn't having it. She cut him off mid-sentence, her voice rising slightly as she pointed out that for decades, Hollywood had told the same stories from the same perspectives. Maybe, Sam, you're just uncomfortable with the fact that other voices are finally getting a chance to be heard, she said. Sam's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. I'm not uncomfortable with anything except mediocrity, he replied. Using diversity as a shield against criticism of poor storytelling is doing a disservice to everyone involved. The audience gasped audibly, and you could see Whoopi trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. She asked Sam about his upcoming project, trying to redirect the energy in the room. But Joy wasn't done. She interrupted again, saying that Sam's attitude was exactly what was wrong. With the old guard in Hollywood, how they couldn't handle the fact that their time was passing and new perspectives were taking center stage. Sam turned to look at her directly, and for a moment the studio went completely silent. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word carrying weight. I've earned my place in this industry through hard work and dedication, not through complaining about who came before me. I respect anyone who puts in the effort to hone their craft, regardless of their background. But that respect has to go both ways. I'm not going to apologize for having an opinion, especially not on a show that claims to value different viewpoints. Joy laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. Having an opinion is one thing, she said. But using a platform to diminish the struggles of marginalized communities is another. Sam's voice dropped even lower. That trademark rumble becoming almost menacing in its calmness. I haven't diminished anyone's struggles, he said. I've simply pointed out that quality should matter more than optics. Do you think audiences are stupid, Joy? Do you believe they can't tell the difference between a story told well and one told to fill a quota? The tension in the room was unbearable now. Ana Navarro tried to interject, suggesting they take a commercial break, but Joy waved her off. She told Sam that his comments were offensive and that maybe he should reconsider whether he was the right person to be speaking on these issues. Sam leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I've been speaking my mind for over 50 years. And I'm not about to stop now, especially not because someone on a talk show told me to watch my words. Joy's face flushed red. This is my show, she shot back. We have every right to challenge guests who come on spouting outdated and harmful rhetoric. Sam raised an eyebrow, his expression almost amused. When did honest conversation become harmful? When did expressing a professional opinion based on decades of experience become something that needs to be silenced? If you can't handle a guest who doesn't agree with you on every point, maybe you should stick to interviewing people who will just nod along and tell you what you want to hear. The audience was split now. Some applauding Sam's defiance, while others looked shocked and uncomfortable. Whoopi tried once more to calm things down, reminding everyone that the View was about diverse perspectives and healthy debate. But Joy wasn't listening. She told Sam there was a difference between debate and disrespect, and that he'd crossed a line. Sam shook his head, his voice rising for the first time. The only line being crossed is the one where people aren't allowed to have honest conversations anymore without being labeled or attacked. Joy stood up from her chair, pointing at Sam. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who clearly doesn't understand the realities of the modern world. Sam remained seated, looking up at her with that steely gaze. You're proving my point, he said. Instead of engaging with what I'm actually saying, you're resorting to theatrics and accusations. That's the problem with modern discourse. People are more interested in performing outrage than actually listening. That was apparently the final straw. Joy turned to the producers off camera and said she wanted Sam removed from the set. The audience erupted into a mixture of boos and cheers, the whole studio descending into chaos. Whoopi was trying to restore order, her voice barely audible over the noise. Sam just sat there, calm as ever, waiting to see what would happen next. Security personnel began moving toward the table, and you could see the other hosts looking at each other in disbelief. Sarah N. was visibly upset, saying this wasn't how things should be handled, that they could work this out. But Joy was adamant. She said Sam had been disrespectful, and that she wouldn't continue the show with him present. Sam finally stood up slowly and deliberately. He looked at Joy, then at the cameras, and said that this was exactly what he'd been talking about. He said that the moment someone challenged the narrative, they were shut down and pushed out. He thanked Whoopi for the invitation and apologized to her specifically for how things had turned out, making it clear he didn't blame her for the situation. As security reached Sam, he held up his hands in a gesture of compliance. He wasn't going to make a scene or resist. He simply gathered his composure, straightened his jacket, and prepared to leave. But before he could take a step, Joy made one more comment. Maybe this will teach you that actions have consequences, she said. That you can't just say whatever you want without facing repercussions. Sam stopped in his tracks. He turned around slowly, and the look on his face made everyone in the studio go quiet. Even the audience seemed to sense that something significant was about to happen. Sam looked directly at Joy, his voice low, but clear enough that every microphone picked it up perfectly. "You've just proven everything I've been saying," he said. "You can't handle dissent, so you use your power to silence it. That's not strength. It's fear masquerading as authority." Joy's mouth fell open, clearly not expecting Sam to respond that way. She sputtered for a moment before finding her words again. "You're twisting the situation, making yourself out to be a victim when you're the one who came on the show with an agenda." Sam's eyebrows rose. "What agenda do you think I have, Joy? I've simply answered the questions you asked me. If you didn't want honest answers, you shouldn't have asked the questions in the first place." Whoopi stepped in firmly now, her voice cutting through the tension. "Let's all take a breath, and remember, we're professionals. Maybe Sam and Joy can find some common ground if they just listen to each other for a moment." Here's the revised version without the timestamps. He told Joy that she didn't know him, didn't know what he'd seen or who he'd worked with or what he valued. He said she was making assumptions about him based on nothing, more than the fact that he'd expressed an opinion she disagreed with. He asked her if that was really the standard now. Anyone who questioned the prevailing narrative was automatically labeled as closed-minded or bigoted. The audience was completely riveted, some people nodding along with Sam, while others looked upset by his words. Sunny host jumped back in, her legal background evident in the way she framed her question. She asked Sam if he could name specific examples of what he considered poor storytelling. That was being excused because of diversity initiatives. Sam paused, clearly thinking about whether to go down that road. He said he wasn't going to name specific projects because that wasn't his point. His point was about the principle, about the fact that criticism had become taboo if the subject matter involved certain protected categories. Joy scoffed at that. She said that criticism had always existed and always would, but that Sam needed to examine why he felt so threatened by the idea that the industry was changing. She suggested that maybe his real issue wasn't with quality at all, but with the fact that stories about white cowboys and rugged individualism weren't the default anymore. Sam's eyes narrowed at that comment. He said Joy was now putting words in his mouth, attributing motivations to him that he'd never expressed. He said that was exactly the kind of bad faith argument that made real conversation impossible. Anna Navarro tried to find middle ground, saying that perhaps both Sam and Joy had valid points, that the conversation about representation and quality didn't have to be either or. Sam nodded at her, acknowledging the attempt at diplomacy. He said he agreed with that his whole point had been that both things mattered. But Joy cut Anna off, saying that Sam had made it very clear where his priorities lay, and that trying to both sides. This issue was missing the point entirely. Sam's patience was clearly wearing thin. He told Joy that she seemed determined to make him into a villain no matter what he said, that she'd already decided who he was before he'd even sat down. He said that kind of prejudgment was ironic coming from someone who claimed to champion open-mindedness and acceptance. Joy's face reddened again, and she said Sam had no right to lecture her about prejudgment when his entire argument was based on nostalgia for a time, when people like her had to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. The exchange was getting more personal now, moving beyond the original topic into something raw. Sam said he'd never claimed the past was perfect, that he knew Hollywood had serious problems with discrimination and exclusion, but he said the answer to past wrongs wasn't to swing the pendulum so far in the other direction that merit became secondary. He said everyone deserved a fair shot, but that once you got that shot, the work had to speak for itself. Joy asked him who got to decide what merit meant, who got to be the arbiter of what work spoke for itself. She said that for decades that decision had been made by a very specific group of people with a very specific worldview. and that maybe Sam was just uncomfortable with the fact that the criteria were expanding. Sam responded that audiences ultimately decided that no amount of critical acclaim or industry awards could make people connect with something that didn't resonate with them on a genuine level. Whoopi interjected again, pointing out that audiences were more diverse than ever, and that what resonated with one group might not resonate with another. She said that was actually a good thing, that it meant more people could see themselves reflected in the stories being told. Sam agreed with that, saying he had no problem with niche audiences or specific perspectives. His issue, he repeated, was when the focus on representation overshadowed the focus on craft. Joy practically exploded at that. She said Sam kept coming back to this idea that diverse storytelling was somehow less crafted, less skilled, less worthy. Sam's voice rose to match hers. He said that wasn't what he was saying at all, that she was deliberately misinterpreting him. He said there were brilliant filmmakers and writers from every background imaginable, and he'd been honored to work with many of them, but there were also mediocre ones. Just like there were mediocre white male filmmakers, and pretending otherwise helped no one. The studio was in complete chaos now. Some audience members were shouting their support for Sam, while others were doing the same for Joy. The other hosts looked overwhelmed, unsure how to regain control of the situation. Sarah Haynes was nearly in tears, saying that this wasn't productive, that they were all talking past each other, but neither Sam nor Joy seemed willing to back down. They were locked in now. Both of them too invested in making their point to find an exit ramp. Joy took a deep breath and seemed to shift tactics. She told Sam that she understood he felt attacked, but that sometimes people needed to hear hard truths about their blind spots. She said that maybe this conversation was uncomfortable for him because it was forcing him to confront things about himself and his career that he hadn't wanted to examine. Sam shook his head slowly, a bitter smile crossing his face. He said the only thing this conversation had forced him to confront was how little nuance existed in public discourse anymore. He elaborated, saying that everything had to be black and white, good or bad, with us or against us. He said there was no room for complexity, no space for someone to say that two things could be true at once. He could support diversity and question execution. He could acknowledge past injustices and still critique present approaches. But according to Joy, according to people who thought like her, that made him the enemy. Joy didn't let that stand. She said that Sam was playing the victim again, acting as if he was being persecuted for simply having an opinion. She pointed out that he'd had a long, successful career in an industry that had been very good to him, and that maybe he should show some gratitude instead of complaining about how things were changing. Sam's expression hardened. He said gratitude didn't mean silence. That being successful didn't obligate him to endorse things he didn't believe in. The argument had reached a fever pitch. Whoopi was trying to call for another commercial break, her voice barely audible over the noise in the studio. Security was still hovering nearby, unsure whether they needed to intervene or not. Sam and Joy were still locked in their staring contest, neither willing to be the first to look away. And then something unexpected happened. Someone from the audience shouted out, asking why they couldn't both be right. The voice cut through the chaos like a knife, and suddenly everyone froze. The audience member, an older woman sitting in the third row, stood up and repeated herself. She said that maybe Sam and Joy were both right. That maybe the problem wasn't that either of them was wrong, but that they were talking about different things entirely. The camera swung toward her, and you could see the surprise on everyone's faces, including Sam and Joy. Whoopi seized the opportunity, asking the woman to elaborate. The woman said that Sam seemed to be talking about artistic standards and creative integrity, while Joy was talking about access and opportunity. She said those weren't opposing ideas, that you could care about both without diminishing either. She looked at Sam and said she understood his concern about quality. But then she looked at Joy and said she also understood the frustration of watching doors stay closed for people who deserved a chance. For a moment, there was complete silence. Sam was the first to respond. He thanked the woman and said that was the most sensible thing anyone had said all morning. He admitted that maybe he hadn't articulated his position as clearly as he should have. That in trying to make his point, he'd left room for misinterpretation. But he maintained that his core argument still stood. That excellence should never be sacrificed, regardless of who was creating the work. Joy looked conflicted, clearly not ready to concede entirely, but also seeming to recognize that the woman had made a valid observation. She said that she appreciated the audience member's perspective, but that she still felt Sam's framing of the issue was problematic. She argued that when someone in his position expressed concerns about quality in the context of diversity initiatives, it sent a message, intentional or not, that diverse voices were inherently less capable.